A message from your scribe.
This is a great pyramid located in Giza. This structure was built about 4,500 years ago by Egyptian builders under the supervision of the architect Khimunu, who was brother of the pharaoh Cheops. This and other pyramids are evidence of human genius and the beauty of contemporary architecture. What is even more astonishing is that even today, there are people who seem to not believe that humanity was capable of building such structures, and try to attribute this work to unspecified extraterrestrial civilizations. The construction of these pyramids has been and continues to be the subject of attention not only for historians, but also for these who, let's say, make videos about it. However, the focus revolves around planning issues, or perhaps most commonly the method of transporting multi-ton stone blocks on ramps to the construction site. But where did all these resources come from? In this video, we will focus on logistics and supply chain management issues in the construction process of this and maybe some other pyramids that still captivate the eyes of tourists, at least those who choose cultural excursions rather than all-inclusive vacay on eastern shores of the Red Sea. The location of the Great Pyramids was not left to chance. Although Giza is now a suburb of Cairo, in ancient times it was somewhat distant from one of the most important centers of social life in the kingdom, namely the city of Memphis. However, the people responsible for designing the pyramids had plenty of reasons for choosing Giza as the location not only for the tombs of kings, but also for dignitaries. As we all know, the ancient Egyptians associated the West with eternal life, which is why most tombs are located on the left bank of the Nile. This still doesn't explain why, for example, the Great Pyramid of Cheops was not built closer to Memphis, near the Pyramid of Djoser, for instance. Today, in the vicinity of the latter, you can find pyramids such as those of Userkaf and Pepi, as well as several tombs left here by later dynasties. One could say that this land covers, or at least at some point covered, several crowned heads. What all these structures have in common is the size. They are not massive constructions, at least when compared to the project that was about to begin in nearby Giza. The Great Pyramid of Cheops required more space above all, and most importantly, a more stable foundation. Egyptians, having learned from the problems of their predecessors like Snefru and his pyramid which was built on sand, decided that Giza would be ideal location for the new funerary complex. There was enough space on the plateau and a hard stone foundation that could not only support the enormous structure, but was also valuable for another quite obvious reason. The architects preferred to equip themselves with the raw materials to build the pyramid in advance, and they knew that they would need a lot of them. The location of the pyramids is not accidental for this reason. Most of the resources were already in place, so transport costs were kept to minimum, so that architects would almost never hear
"Not enough stone, my lord."
In his histories, Herodotus introduces us to the geography of Egypt and reminds us why the pharaohs choose to locate their tombs and pyramids on the western bank of the Nile. Contrary to appearances, there weren't as many places to build these enormous temple complexes. As one proceeds beyond Heliopolis up the country, Egypt becomes narrow, the Arabian range of hills which has a direction from north to south, shutting it in upon the one side and the Libyan range upon the other. The former ridge runs on without a break and stretches away to the sea called the Erythraean. It contains the quarries whence the stone was cut for the pyramids of Memphis. This is the point where it ceases its first direction and bends away in the manner above indicated. In its greatest length from east to the west, it is, as I have been informed, a distance of 2 months' journey towards the extreme east. Its skirts produce frankincense. Such are the chief features of this range. On the Libyan side, the other ridge whereon the pyramid stand is rocky and covered with sand. Its direction is the same as that of the Arabian ridge in the first part of its course. When the plan for the Great Pyramid of Cheops was finally laid out, a quarry was also located not far from its southern wall. Today, it is believed that most of the limestone which forms the core of this and other pyramids came from quarries located on the plateau. But there are almost no traces of these quarries today. Archaeological research, however, confirmed the speculations, because it turns out that a hole with a depth of up to 30 meters was definitely located on the southern side of the Great Pyramid. It was, however, filled in. The most reasonable explanation for filling the quarry is the desire to clean a construction site of remaining building materials and simply to beautify the landscape around the funerary complex. After all, the resting pharaoh wouldn't want the view from the afterlife to be marred by remnants of the quarry. Partially, this theory is supported by the accounts of Diodorus Siculus, who stated that the area around the temple was exceptionally clean. It is said that the stone was transported over long distances from Arabia, and that these structures were erected using earthen ramps, because at the time lifting machines had not yet been invented. Surprisingly, even though such massive constructions were raised in the area surrounded by sand, there is no trace left of either the ramps or the stone quarrying. So it seems that this is not the result of patient work of the people, but rather as if entire complex was miraculously placed on the surrounding sand by some god. Vast quantities of crushed limestone, rock fragments, sand, clay and gypsum debris currently fill the bottom of the quarry. Precise archaeological research have not yet been conducted, but it is believed that at the quarry's bottom, evidence could be found that would confirm not only how the stone blocks were quarried, but also how they were transported to the construction site. However, to get them there, they first had to be separated from the bedrock. Wedges, most likely made of copper, were placed at small intervals on the rock block, and then using mallets they were driven deeper until a bit of it broke off. If the edges of the block were uneven, further shaping to make its sides even was carried out on site to reduce its weight immediately. Finished blocks were leveraged onto sleds to place them, which were then pulled out of the quarry on a slippery surface. Next to those pulling the sleds, there were also individuals carrying water, which they poured onto the ground to reduce friction. Historians have attempted to calculate how much stone could have come from this place. A substantial amount of the stone blocks was needed for the construction of the pyramid, as according to the most popular theory, their number hovered around 2,300,000. According to the same theory, the size of the quarry suggests that the total volume of the limestone could have exceeded even the volume of the pyramid itself. However, the same researchers point out that during the quarrying process a significant amount of material was lost, due to irregular splitting of the rock blocks or further shaping. In any case, according to these rough estimates, the stone quarried on site could have accounted for 70 to 80% of the material used in construction. But where the rest of the supplies come from? The Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed not only from limestone. Granite, basalt, gypsum and even common mud bricks were also used in the construction. Limestone came from the quarry located on the plateau and also from other quarries located nearby. But the granite likely came from Aswan above the Nile, alabaster from Luxor, and basalt was sourced near the Fayum oasis. To manage the transportation over such long distances, the blocks were loaded onto barges and transported by the river. However, the matter is not that simple. The plateau where the pyramids are located is at some distance from the Nile. Some workers had to first dig sufficiently deep canals to the Nile, allowing the remaining materials and other essential goods to be delivered as close as possible to the construction site. We return once again to the Herodotus descriptions, this time to learn about the preparatory works. Although this account may not be the most precise, given that it was created 2 millennia after the constructions, it nevertheless represents genuine reflections of Egyptian priests, who were the storytellers to the historian. Some were required to drag blocks of stone down to the Nile, from the quarries in the Arabian range of hills. Others received the blocks after they had been conveyed in boats across the river, and drew them to the range of hills called the Libyan. 100,000 men labored constantly and were relieved every 3 months by a fresh lot. It took 10 years' oppression of the people to make the causeway for the conveyance of the stones, a work not much inferior in my judgments to the pyramid itself. The causeway is 5 furlongs in length, 10 fathoms wide, and in height, at the highest part, 8 fathoms. It is built of polished stone and is covered with carvings of animals. To make it took 10 years, as I said, or rather to make the causeway. The works on the mount where the pyramid stands and the underground chambers which Cheops intended as vaults for his own use, these last were built on sort of an island surrounded by water introduced from the Nile by a canal. The pyramid itself was 20 years in building. The canal which most likely encircled the pyramid was dug not only for aesthetic reasons, but also served the workers to transport locally quarried stone blocks to the base of the pyramid, where they were handed over to the builders. Egyptians also excavated a larger canal, where goods were unloaded. Supply ships then headed to the port located a bit farther to the east near the temple. There, the workers would disembark from their vessels and rest only to set sail back to the Nile the next day for more supplies. On one of these boats, along with 40-person crew, sailed Inspector Mera, who describes his adventures in a collection of documents discovered relatively recently in the last decade. The inspector records are significant find because no other documents of this kind have survived from the times of Cheops' reign to our present day. Among other things, he describes an entrance into a canal known as Roche Hufu, a rather uncreative name which can be translated as the gate to the lake Cheops. Ahead of the crew there probably stretched a breathtaking view of the setting sun, partially obscured by almost completed pyramid, which bore the name Achet Hufu, meaning Cheops' horizon. I probably don't need to mention that the temple located near the port where sailors stopped had a similar name, which strongly reaffirms the pharaoh's megalomania. In any case, we know that Merar's crew transported limestone blocks to the construction site from a nearby quarry located in Tura. The material supplied by the inspector was of much higher quality than the limestone quarried on site, as evidenced by the fact that it was extracted from a tunnel quarry, not an open pit one. Blocks could have been used to cover the outer layer of the pyramid or to fill the pits with cedar bolts, which were prepared in advance for the funeral ceremonies. In any case, within 10 days during this period, Merar and his companions made the journey to Tura and back at least 3 times. The crew continued the work of transporting construction materials for several months, from June to late November, when the water in the Nile dropped to levels that made it impossible to navigate the canals. Then the crew went to the delta to support the construction of the port, which was meant to extend the Egyptian supply chain, mainly to the eastern shores of the sea. Finally, it was time for them to rest. At least that's what we speculate, because there was no records of Merar's activity from January to March, even though they were found in one place. More precisely, they were found in Wadi El Garf, a port in the western shore of the Red Sea, where the file, Merar's team, managed the transport of copper from Sinai Peninsula and cedar and ebony from regions located in Syro-Palestine. As June approached, the sailors set out west again to surf near Giza. Such a situation may have persisted for several decades, especially considering that the rulers of the 4th dynasty truly liked pyramidal structures. Based on the documents left in the ruins of the Wadi El Garf port by Merar, we can conclude that at least some of the workers were highly skilled and valued by the king. But the case of the inspector's file is somewhat special. They received gifts from the pharaoh's administration. They were also provided well with high-quality food. Their tables often featured not only bread and meat as among common laborers, but also fish and other delicacies, including honey and dates. It seems that Merar's team was of a great importance from the pharaoh's perspective, perhaps even elite, as confirmed by the name of the file itself, which in documents is referred as Setepsa, meaning elite, chosen file precisely. However, this does not change the fact that both Merar and his workers were employed on a contract. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel.